question could be asked when debating the value of heritage. What if we stop pretending that culture has a role today in the construction of metropolitan urbanity? We should probably give up pretending and accept the fact that culture is weak. Dostoevsky is less popular than Ronaldo. But at the same time, we must continue to hope versus hope. Sperare contra spem, as San Paolo said. And we must convince ourselves that each of us has a moral choice to make within our action as architects, urban designers, planners who deal with nowadays city complexity. Collective action perspective will also be needed for the problems that we can solve in our daily activities. The heritage of our metropolitan cities or territories must sustain the impact of metropolitan dynamics. Moreover, the testament left by the generation that precede us is not only in the hands of conservation and protection experts. Still, it must also be considered by those of us who are agents in the metropolitan cities construction. We must maintain to preserve it, must improve to implement it, and transform to keep it from decay when the city context is out of scale concerning the needs of society. All human beings have both physical and spiritual needs, beauty, social relation, and relationship with the natural environment. Therefore, two planes are intervened. On the one hand, necessity, on the other, beauty and justice. The Metropolitan Architecture Project is a gesture of attention and caring. It's a fractal point of our context characterized by the contradiction and crisis of our time. The new crisis comes from Latin crino, to separate, separare, decidere. Every historical crisis is also and above all a crisis of tradition. The crisis is also in medicine, evaluating, judging, rethinking, rebirth. And rebirth is questioning. It is identifies the character of things. It's not the dictatorship of resilience. Resilience is a name we know from science of metal. A material can return to the configuration it had before impact. Resilere in Latin means rebound. I don't like that concept. Rebirth instead means that to preserve is to transform sometimes. Culture and its symbols are true. True not as something that can be demonstrated. On the contrary, symbols indicate a different understanding, a sense, a direction of life that is very true. The direction of life, for example, decides how collective resources are used. Symbols are more accurate and more prosperous than the description that attests what is happening. Values and symbols are found in poetry and in that verb poieo, which is the foundation of the architect action, even so far removed from those that inform the construction of our metropolises today, which know nothing of the human body's vulnerability, fatigue, and weakness. The METHER project indicates the need to discover new relationships that structure reality. This is a profound sense of the collaboration between Inhabitants Metro Hub and the MS Lab Research Unit of the Department of Architecture and Urban Studies of Politecnico di Milano, operating at the Piacenza campus. The co-construction of a metropolitan urbanity that respects the past, but is not subordinated to it. What Ernesto Nathan Roger, our architecture school founder, defined a project of discontinuity in the continuity of tradition, which is utopian but possible, that is reality. Therefore, I leave the floor and thank him, as always, to Remy Siet-Peking, the Metro Hub initiative leader. Thank you very much, Remy. Thank you very much, Rafael, to host us and allow us to speak about this topic for us so relevant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Antonella. Dear friends, dear, I would say, champions of metropolitan discipline, metropolitan issues, metropolitan concerns. You know, on this important day or month of call it Urban October, where we celebrate the importance or keep reminding us the importance of humanity that lives together in a more confined space, the urban setting. And the forthcoming Metropolitan Day that we are celebrating in 2 days, but more importantly, in the context of this collaboration, as my good friend Antonella has said, and many other good faces that I've seen here on this journey of advancing this important topic. I don't know if my colleague Rafa can share a few things we have put together, just to give you a flavor of how, as we have been discussing within a close knit of that network of Metropolis, the importance of linking culture, heritage within metropolitan area, a topic that had in the past been maybe under-researched or under-invested. And we found this a very good niche, a good reminder of how, the vernacular around a heritage culture in metropolitan area could be quite important. I'm not sure if Rafa is sharing. So what we would like to share with you is some of the things we have been doing. On the next one, we just want to give you a flavor of what is coming in 2 days, and I hope you are all here to us on the Metropolitan Day. It is very important initiative that we have put together with Metropolis and many of you to really mark that moment in a year to bring together different components of different actors, different sectors, different dimensions of metropolitan issue, I would say. So Metropolitan Day is really to promote and make sure that we have a reminder of what we agreed in Montreal in 2015, where the issue of metropolitan dimension was really at the heart of the discussion during the preparation of the Habitat 3 that led to the new urban agenda. And you recall that even during the COVID-19, metropolitan areas were at the forefront of that dimension of how we deal with the crisis and that rebirth of what Antonella says she doesn't lack resilience, but some of these metropolitan areas have rebound in a way because they were better prepared. And that we have to make sure that on the 7th, all of us, we mark in our own ways how we remember the role of metropolitan areas in facing many challenges. We are also in a month of the year of climate as well. So this is also another topic that when you talk about climate and the role and the contribution of metropolitan areas and the solutions that they are providing and can provide even more is even more important. On the next slide, so this is, we are drawing this important, the campaign or the discussion we have had in the past has been very important, that we have to acknowledge the importance of metropolitan areas. And when we are talking about heritage and culture, they have been recognized. So we are not reinventing. We are just like to remind people that within the new urban agenda, this is really anchored in the discussion, and that we recognize that metropolitan areas are human, is part of the human culture, is part of the tangible or intangible culture that we have to live with, and the importance of multi-scale or multi-actor intervention. So working from local to supranational and vice versa is very important that we keep that connection happening. And that to have a metropolitan area that has its own some form of identity, tangible or intangible. It's a postcard is very important. However you define it, that's part of the culture, that's how people feel or believe they prefer to live in this part or that part of the city. On the next slide, what we want to highlight is that even within the SDGs, when we try to bring the importance of cities in general and metropolitan areas, as many of you are already familiar with, the SDGs are interconnected. So the metropolitan areas could be read through all the targets, all the goals and the indicators as well. You can still see the dimension of what role the metropolitan area can play. So that's how we approach it as a territory. That's why in our discourse, we see the territorial dimension of metropolitan. And I recall last conversation we had with Antonella in our small group that she didn't see metropolitan area just as urban setting, but in connection with the rural. So that territorial dimension is very important. And this was shown in some of the work that we have done in the past with Antonella. The next slide. So what's in the context of COVID, we are taking crisis here. It says the COVID, the UN Habitat prepare a report called Cities and Pandemic. And when you look at from the lens of metropolitan areas, it's very key that cooperation is very important. The inclusion, participation of actors is very important. These are all music in your ears. And that areas that have been affected more are larger metropolitan areas in many cities, in many countries. And that the issue, that also unveiled the importance of inequity. And we also know that some areas of prosperities were challenged in that time. But at the same time, the issue of digitalization became so important. And when you look at where all these things are happening, they're happening in larger cities, So territorialization is very important. And that the metropolitan dimension that we know already had this international, I would say, veil had even been reinforced. How the importance of larger cities in supporting or curbing the COVID have been very important. I know in many countries where metropolitan area were carved out, where lockdown, to go out or go in just to contain that. On the next slide, just to bring out the fact that as we are moving, as the world is changing, metropolization is increasing as well. So let's not be, though we have more, in terms of numbers, most intermediary cities emerging, but when it comes to the sheer quantity of people living in urban areas, they will be likely to be in larger towns of more than 300,000. So we are in the discipline that will be in high demand, and we have to equip ourselves to govern, manage, plan, finance, and really work with this type of metropolitan areas. And in some countries, it's already become the norm. In other contexts, Rafa, the next slide, please. So that's why within the UN Habitat, the Metropolitan Management Program looks at four different entry points. We have to look at regulations that support metropolitan areas, look at how planning and design can affect existing or can help design better metropolitan areas for the future. How do we govern those metropolitan areas and how do we finance them? So these are all, again, even if they are in the what we call drivers of change within the UN Habitat, they are still very important when you look from the governance side, from the metropolitan lens. On the next slide, we just want to say that to do so, we can't just say we are research is enough. We have to make sure that we have equipped ourselves with instruments, with guides, with tools to actually address some of these challenges or take advantage of some of the opportunities that we have in metropolitan areas. We need to cooperate, we need to partner, we need to collaborate. this is essential. Again, we have to advocate. Hence, I mentioned earlier the Metropolitan Day. We have to create more partnership, more networks, as we are trying to do, and create more opportunities for learning and exchanging through this seminar, this type of event, expert group meetings, workshops, training, and partnership with university, as Inhabitants is establishing this metropolitan uni network where all universities working on metropolitan matters can meet. On the next slide. So just to say that since this is very important for the constituency and people I see in the room are very much within the area of capacity where we see the niche is really looking within the context of training, of exchanges or research or networks, and creating more alliances to move forward together. Alone, nobody will do it, and UN Habitat is quite pleased to create this, to continue creating space and for advocating for the metropolitan matters. The next one, very quickly, just to say that with the University, Politecnico de Milano, we have a long collaboration, and we are always very happy, excited to collaborate recently with where we pulled together a few colleagues to come in to fill in some of the gaps. So we're going to keep doing this. On the next slide. Okay, just to give you, because Antonella mentioned the work we have been doing on the Metro Hub. Is some practical example we have done in a few countries for those who are interested, especially in Latin America, where we have programs in universities to design programs to address, to equip public servants and students and master students, especially in how do they manage metropolitan areas, because this has been ad hoc. So we are piloting this, and we feel that there is a more demand in equipping metropolitan managers with the necessary skills, knowledge, and expertise to manage metropolitan areas. So we are doing that at postgraduate and a diploma level, and other courses with other universities that are coming forward. So anyone interested, let us know. Next one. Okay, network is very important. It's part of, again, at the capacity. We have to network, we have to know each other, we have to really lean on each other. So that's why we feel that it's important that we continue promoting this. So some of these initiatives we see working through some entry point or the area of strength of some partners that we have in the room, some working on modeling, in France working on mega cities, in Italy with territorialization of SDG and metropolitan discipline led by Antonella team, Israel with Professor Turner working on heritage. So many entry points really to build that network and really change the discourse and bring the metropolitan areas to the level where it ought to be. Other partners have shown their interest. We're going to try to find ways to create a very interesting or win-win type of network or platform to bring all these actors together within the network of university and research or institution of higher learning. The next one, I think we are getting to finish soon. So just the initiative that is coming up, this have been in preparation for a while now. It's the Global State of Metropolitan report that we are putting together. We have started working on the data side, looking at where do they stand, and we have now the case studies from different parts of the world. And we are now starting, one of the kind. This had not been done before, so we keep watching this space for the release of the report probably next year. The next one. So that's all we have to share. Very excited. It took longer, but I'm always very passionate about this topic that I feel that is always on the research, on the study. So again, Antonella, thanks for this opportunity and look forward to strengthening our collaboration. Over to you. Thanks, Rafa.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Remy. I leave the floor to Eric Huber. I ask him to introduce the topic of the metropolis within the idea of the heritage of the metropolis, and also the meaning of this partnership with Metro Hub, introducing also the three main topics that Metropolis in this World Metropolitan Day presented us has some of the priority in which we have to deal to try to develop this topic. Thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you, Antonella. It's I'm very pleased to be here today. So the idea for this, we can say this international working group working on the Metropolis and heritage. The idea was coming from a demand from Francesco Banderin to define or to find new approaches for heritage when you were in UNESCO. So there were some ideas about the Metropolis. In fact, today they have in the UNESCO and they have very clear definition from monuments, for historical centers, and for intangible heritage, for landscape. And so this is, we can consider different categories that are well defined, and the approach is really mainly conservative. And 10 years ago, they developed a new method, which is the historical urban landscape, which is coming from the geography or from landscape or from urban planning, and to have a more a global approach or on heritage. So this was interesting as a method. But the question now is how to define the new categories, which is facing our contemporary challenges. And so the idea was to make the link with the metropolis. As Remy said, now in this century, the majority of urban dwellers are living in metropolitan areas. Today it's more than 60%. It will be probably much more at the end of this century. And so we can consider that the metropolis is the main characteristic, the main feature of our century. So we can have in mind that our heritage for the future generation will be the metropolis, will be one of the main features of our century, will be the metropolis. And so this is the entry point. You can say it is simple, but in fact it gives a lot of questions regarding the heritage for several reasons. The first one probably is the definition of the metropolis. There is a kind of global consensus around the definition of a metropolis, which is a system in a system. It is a node. It is a node in a network, and what it makes the metropolis is its place in the network, and it is a reason of this specific strategic location that make the metropolis really attractive and attract people for job and for housing and quality of life, if there is. And so this is so when we try to define what is inside the metropolis, what is outside the metropolis, we try to see what is coherent. And generally today, the main definition is more, can say, related to the economy and the we can say the urban areas, or which is where the people are people who are attached to different centrality inside the urban agglomeration are, despite they live in rural areas or in urban areas, they are inside the metropolis. So it is linked with the mobility. So this was the consensus that we had 10 years ago, and now we are not so comfortable with this definition, because because of the COVID crisis, revealed that a lot of people can be attached when linked with these centralities, but without living every day using public transportation on their car, because they can be linked by internet in different cities or elsewhere in the world. And so the definition of the metropolis is blurred, and the size of the metropolis can be up and down, can extend and reduce. It was reduced, in fact, during the last definition of 10 years ago regarding the daily mobility, but it expand if we take into consideration the relation with the internet. So this is one of the problems. We were speaking of what when we speak about the metropolis itself. There is blurred boundaries, and when we consider that the metropolis is a territory, we consider that it is not very clear, and it is mainly a system. In a system, it is a node in a network that makes the metropolis with the changing boundaries. So we cannot have something which is stable, which is you can say this is the object we have to preserve, for example. And so if we want to put the metropolis with the question of heritage, we'll have a big problem for the exact definition of the metropolis itself. The other thing is, inside the metropolis, it's moving from time to time. For example, if you think about what is the main feature of a metropolis, generally there are the nodes inside this big node. We can say the nodes are the main centers, the CBD, the center part of the most representative of the identity of this area. Can be the heritage, the historical center, etc., or the Eiffel Tower, or big monuments like that. So we can have this in mind. But in fact, when we think about the contemporary elements which are not preserved, like a CBD, you have a lot of towers that we destroy, and we built another one, but the CBD is still there. And so the approach of conservation doesn't work. For the previous approach of conservation doesn't work. And so if we want to have an idea about what is the heritage in the metropolis, it cannot be something so rigid like with a monument and want to conserve as it is. And so this is just 2 points. These 2 points are question directly the question of heritage itself inside the metropolis and on the definition of the metropolis. The other thing is the main point probably is the main question that we can have in mind before going to the heritage policies is to have a clearer definition of what is the value of the metropolis. If we consider that the metropolis is our heritage for the next generation, what is the value of our metropolis today? What can be considered valuable? And so this needs to have a clear definition of what is a metropolis, but what is the value of the metropolis. And if we go a little bit further, when you have policies to give more value in the metropolis on some elements that are great, that are the main feature of the metropolis, we can consider that it is in fact a policy that make more value in the metropolis, that patrimonialize the metropolis. So we should have a look on the policy when you make more nature in city. When you put more, you transform a motorway to pedestrian area, like in the center part of Paris, for example, 2 motorways along the Seine River. You change completely the meaning of this space. You change the value of this space, and you work on the something which is the main infrastructure of public space of the metropolis, the main arterial. main arterials of the metropolis. So this is crucial. And there is a lot of policy which are focusing on culture to, like in Istanbul, and they change a lot of things in their city to give more value or more attractiveness for tourism through culture. This is one part of the value, but there is a lot of other policies that we can have in mind when we think about the value and the valuation of the metropolis. So there is a lot of other questions that you can have in mind, but this is the entry point that we have in mind, and to develop new approaches. So in fact, if we think that from the beginning with Mike and Francesco, and after with Seoul and all this network, the idea is to work with two types of actors to make this research, innovative research. It is to mobilize researchers and the academicians, the universities, and also planners. And because we consider that planners has a lot of materials regarding the preparation of metropolitan policies, and of course, academicians or the researchers, it is their work to do research, and they will do it better than everybody. But the idea is not to work only with academicians or only with planners, is to cross the ideas with them. So we begin with the universities, but planners are coming from in each cities to work with the universities, and it's very important for us. The other thing is to cross people from culture and people from planning, territorial planning or metropolitan planning, mainly on the metropolitan scale, of course. So two fields, we can say two different cultures. But this is very important for us to have on board the people from culture and heritage, and to push them, and because they know better than the others the importance of the concept they are working on, and to question their concept, and also to work with planners to push them and to take into consideration, perhaps to introduce more the notion of culture but in a larger scale, through heritage, and to give more value in the metropolis, because the metropolis is not only, as everybody knows, it's not only infrastructure and buildings and people, it's also mindset and culture. And so we're very happy to have all of you on board. And of course, we're beginning the work with 15 cities with academicians and practitioners. This is a first point. Of course, we can enlarge it, but this first moment and in this process to work and to define the first ideas through a survey, the first elements to build the research axis for next year is very attractive, I think, and very exciting for us. So thank you very much to participate.
Thank you very much, Eric. I think that this explanation was needed and super clear for us. So we organize this day, dividing in three main topic and panel. We will start where we will present a synthesis of the research, of the PhD research related to this topic. And at the end of each panel, we will have a small comment by our guest. I really thank our guest for generosity and to stay with us. We will have a first dialogue on spatial justice. Valentina Gagliulo, Nicole De Togni, Laura Pesci, Tatiana Rivera Pabon are the PhD researcher, and the discussant is Carlos Tapia from Sevilla University. Then we will have a dialogue on democracy for heritage. Yoonjae Kim, Daniel Jomeida de Almeida e Adva Matar and the discussant will be Professor Gramsci from Columbia University, and we will have a dialogue on governance is caring from Yana Chowdhury, Xenia Mazenina, and Clemency Gibbs. And the discussant is Camillo Boano from UCL and Politecnico di Torino. Thank you very much for your presence and your time. I will leave the floor to Valentina Gagliuri.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I would like just to introduce briefly the dialogue of early stage researcher for Forum for World Metropolitan Day in this project called METHER, Metropolitan Heritage Carrying Metropolises, in which my colleagues and me are going to explain what is our perspective on spatial justice. Can you hear me? Si sente? Okay. But what I would like to underline is that although it may be easier to understand the geolocation of episodes of injustice, it's more complex to understand how to represent on ground floor the factors of social change with physical impacts that can define for us gradients of spatial and environmental justice. However, a better understanding of the role of care for architecture and metropolitan urban planning in a specific space of city and its metropolitan region as a principle of sustainability could contribute to the definition of a new methodological process through which it's possible to learn the multidimensional logical reasons that determine the condition of segregation and marginalization, vulnerability and exposure to environmental and social risk to which the biography of our metropolises will be exposed in the coming years. Especially in the recent scientific debate and new needs based on spatial causality, specifically related to the urban of metropolitan scale, has emerged in order to explore the generative effects of multidimensional relationship between the four metropolitan dimensions, the physical, the social, the economic, and the land governance too. But this kind of relationship are malleable with respect to the process of technological innovation, artistic creativity, economic development, social change, as well as the degree of health and care of places in relation to environmental degradation, social polarization by income inequality, and international policies practice that more specifically can contribute to the evidence of conditional spatial and environmental justice, and quoting Soya, injustice as well. However, spatial environmental justice for us are not substitutes or for any kind of injustice or social or economic one, but suggest a new way of looking at justice from critical spatial perspective. For this perspective, there is always a relevant spatial dimension from which we have to start from, specifically in mapping process, in context with the greater environmental and social impacts that are reflected explicitly and also implicitly also in the heritage space of metropolis. So, with respect to this first consideration, my question that emerged is, how can the future process of mapping of social environmental vulnerability on metropolitan grounds can become a new methodological tool and knowledge project for diagnosis of the state of care of our spaces of metropolis according to the degrees of spatial justice between compared metropolitan cities? So for us, and overall, in our perspective, the concept of spatial environmental justice overall through metropolitan cartography maps can be understood as the result of methodological process that guides the search for information and spatial data aimed at recognizing the phenomena and alteration of hybrid landscape in metropolitan dimension. Spatial justice also introduces us a method and an operator for construction of our cartography of care that could be understood as a logical process through which the relationship between intrinsic concepts, starting from the original meaning of the words, can determine a new taxonomy, and so that new kind of keywords that can be ordered through a semantic package that convey and drive the metropolitan cartography projects through open source and georeference data. But overall, the objective of this set of maps is also to be able to define a new qualitative variation and of justice and injustice in physical space, and also is to design new shape or rules that we called new patterns of linkage urban-rural through systemic interpolation between open source data related to social, economic, and statistical dimension. Overall, the operational purpose of metropolitan cartography maps through what we call phase of data mining and data modeling through semiology graphic is not to represent just simple example of spatial injustice in a descriptive way, but is to identify and understand the implicit evaluation that produce qualitative gradients of what Soya called just geographies for the dissemination of new kind of narratives, new imaginaries, and new knowledge. And I will leave the floor to my colleague Nicole.
Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. So my research approach is rooted in the critical assumption that the disciplinary and public narratives that also Valentina was mentioning in her closure, being them collective or individual that are related to urban heritage, could influence its perception and the representation, both for a general and specialized public, with a strong impact on the heritage patrimonialization process and protection. So this narrative can be observed in a synchronic perspective to acknowledge the multiplicity of different actors and agents that are involved in the process of recognition and protection of the metropolitan heritage and the image that they have of the urban landscape. On the other side, these narratives can be observed and investigated on a diachronic level over a long period of interest in their genesis and relationship with the physical environment. And in this perspective, these discourses convey the political, the disciplinary, the social climate of precise historical moments, as well as the interest, aspiration, and imaginaries of the actors who originate them. And any cultural event or policy that act on the understanding, on the institutionalization or the celebration of different types of heritage can offer an interesting moment of rethinking or consolidation of political, strategic, urban, architectural readings that are related to heritage. And the related narratives can represent potential elements of recognition of the heritage, of boosterism, but also of fragility, especially in connection to public history and the processes of patrimonialization of an ordinary landscape that is rarely recognized as an institutional and institutionalized heritage. Open research questions are how can narratives, imageries, and images of the metropolitan heritage be taken into account and mapped? And if we could imagine to layer them over the more traditional and technical ways of mapping, to portray an image of the city that is more fair in acknowledging different spatial interests and perspectives. And in the growing acknowledgement of the role of the different social groups and the different citizen interests in dealing with the metropolitan heritage, how can we work on different and in some cases also divergent narratives in a synchronic perspective, and also how to consider them and represent them in a diachronic recollection if we are interested in a long period of time and in shifting in meaning and recognition of the heritage. And how can this acknowledgement of the coexistence of different narratives support as researcher in reflecting on the concept of the ordinary heritage, overcoming the traditional concept of monument and monumentalization, and also of authorship as the value that is acknowledged to single building, to open and to include social values and also immaterial aspect, opening in this way to the concept and to broadening the concept of spatial justice. So we know that divergent narratives affect the metropolitan heritage, framing on the long term an interesting disciplinary, institutional, but also social milieu that deserves to be reconstructed in detail and related on one hand with the built environment in its original but also current contemporary features, and on the other hand with the complex frameworks of national policies, social movements, circulation of ideas, and disciplinary model related to the urban landscape. So this perspective could be crucial to understand also the urban tension originating in the patrimonialization processes and in a complex and shifting concept of heritage itself, opening to a more conscious and comprehensive reading of the metropolis, focusing on a more fair and comprehensive concept of spatial justice. And I leave the floor to my colleague. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you for inviting me to participate in this event. Since I am not fluent in English, I will read my note. I apologize for it. My name is Lucia Pesci. I'm from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I'm Executive Vice President and Academic Coordinator of LACAM, Latin American Forum of Environmental Sciences, UNESCO Chair, United Network for Sustainable Development, and convener of the Sustainability Team of the Global Initiative Over World Heritage. My questions are, what is the relationship between heritage and the urban cultural landscape? How can the landscape contribute to sustainable metropolitan management? The concept of cultural landscape becomes increasingly relevant due to its character not only as an articulator and backbone of society and nature relationship, but an expression of the heritage and territory relationship. Heritage landscape are currently conceived as a system composed of natural, cultural, material, and immaterial components that acts as a referent of the cultural identity of a given community. Also recognizes as a UNESCO heritage category, cultural landscape became a new and rich conceptual advance around heritage, explicitly recognizing its territorial dimension and uniqueness and the character of the social construction that the landscape supposes. In Metropolises, we recur an innovative conceptual and methodological approach to our heritage landscape and promote a shifting focus from singular heritage to comprehensive categories, from heritage to heritage landscape. Thus conceived, the concept of heritage, landscape, and spatial justice are intimately articulated. The urban landscape is an essential dimension of quality of life in metropolises, and citizens have the right to a quality landscape. Therefore, recognizing through reading the landscape the pattern that give it its identity, its DNA, is key to formulating sustainable urban management policies. That is the topic of my research and the challenge in my project. The heritage of the metropolitan area of Buenos Aires might be considered as an archipelago of fragmented at diverse scale surrounded by a sea of fabric built and very diverse green spaces. Heterogeneity is the norm from all points of view and in all situations, even in the historic center of the capital city and of the municipality. The recognition of this DNA should be the basis for the formulation of analysis and proposal strategies, and for the formulation of effective and sustainable preservation policies. Finally, Giovanna reads, environmental justice is social justice. The photo was taken on September 44 on the World Day Against Climate Change in Buenos Aires. Thank you very much. Tatiana?
Hello, everyone. The next slide. Por favor, I'm from Colombia. I'm a PhD student of the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. So my question is how to improve urban-rural connectivity and inclusiveness in metropolitan areas proximal to agricultural landscapes. So I will answer based on the case study of my thesis, that is the Colombian coffee cultural landscape that you're seeing in the photo. For those that do not know it, this is one of the largest evolutionary landscape in the World Heritage List. To make an idea of its magnitude, it has 207,000 hectares, covering 47 municipalities and 3 metropolitan areas, with a population of 500,000 to 700,000 inhabitants each. The UNESCO recognition considers coffee culture as a determinant of a rural landscape, shaped by the relationship between its inhabitants with their traditional way of life and their natural environment. The protected area favors the conservation of agricultural land uses and the elements of architectural value inscribed in the rural landscape. But unfortunately, it does not consider its connections with the urban landscape and the metropolitan dynamics. So if we think that in general, the territorial delimitations of cultural landscapes and the difference in extension and morphological readings generates distinct valuation and preservation possibilities, we must discuss some problems of this coffee cultural landscape delimitation related with spatial justice. First of all, the current delimitation generates the fragmentation of the productive territory. By focusing on the plantation areas, it does not recognize the integrality of the productive chain and the industrialization stages developed in urban areas, nor its spaces and actors. Spaces like the industrial complexes with threshing coffee factories, warehouses, working class neighborhoods, and actors like the coffee industrial workers. In second place, it ignores the territorial and patrimonial structure and value of the technical networks configured over a century for sustaining the coffee production, like the railways, overhead cables, and roads. In this sense, it doesn't consider its modernizing transformation of the 20th and 21st centuries and their impacts on urbanization and current metropolization. So to solve these problems, we propose a broader analysis of the landscape as a complex spatial system configured by the functional, structural, and morphological relationships establishing the different subsystems that support the coffee production process, from rural plantations to urban industrialization and to the trading port. To do this, we value the railway system and its role in the transformation of one of the 3 metropolises of the coffee landscape, that is the Central Western Metropolitan Area, with the city of Pereira as its main nucleus. From the systematic narrative, which reinterprets the relationship of interdependence and complementarity between countryside and city, on a metropolitan scale, we suggest the hypothesis that the railroads have, even though that are deactivated, a structuring role in the coffee landscape. In fact, they demarcate and connect the coffee industrial heritage system that has historically articulated the productive territory and its ecological structure. So although it has not been recognized yet, this coffee industrial heritage connected by the railway has a potential as an open public metropolitan space. Moreover, as a conduit of sprawl and of informal peri-urbanization, the old railways currently connects urban, peri-urban and rural spaces and actors that must be valued. So its inclusion in the territorial planning processes and its transformation from gray to green infrastructure could contribute to overcoming the landscape fragmentation and open up new perspectives for its sustainable preservation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. I leave the floor to Professor Carlos Tapia from Sevilla.
Thank you. I thank the organizers for the invitation to participate in this event. I will go straight to my response with some very concentrated personal observations due to the short time available. This short time prevents me from giving a detailed individual commentary, but I can expand on what I am going to say to each author if they wish by email. So I will improvise a small integration exercise based on one of the cases, the last one. Each example, based on my contribution, will give, or so I hope, support to the whole which suffers from a certain thematic dispersions, I think, nuanced by the notion of spatial justice. Probably, by gathering these four contributions under a common framework, it is possible to exacerbate my critique of the research of each of the participants, because probably the main notion of such research is not the character of a spatial justice. Certainly, given that this is what the title states, the research goes beyond the definition of spatial justice itself, a question which, after 3 decades of development, still needs to be worked out conceptually. Nevertheless, the interest that the critical action has for a research that is subjected to scrutiny under a differential argument, as a doctor who pretends to give a diagnosis will say, is an effective formative method. At the same time, it enriches the studied object. And so, if you allow me to use my gaze on the Colombian coffee landscape to comment on this compilation, I would say that, because I am somewhat familiar with the studies in this subject, I join in the necessary critique made by Tatiana. In itself, all research must contain a critical bias, but in this case, she denounces the globalizing institutionalization of the landscape, which forcibly patrimonializes and does not adequately adjust to the very different characterization across the planet. She proposes the broader characterization of actors in a complex spatial system configured by the functional, the structural, and the morphological. And here I will contribute my view, most probably obvious to Tatiana, but which the audience and the other researchers on this panel might find useful. The coffee growing axes are located in Quindío, Antioquia, Caldas, Risaralda, and fragment of the Valle del Cauca. Here, coffee production incorporated, I wonder if the word is better complemented, and in excess, cafe tourism, routes, hotels, signature architecture. And the criticism of the model that the research I know denounces is that the most important area in terms of coffee quality, environmental and social sustainability, are currently outside the UNESCO declarations. For instance, Huila, Sierra Nevada, Santa Marta, Nariño, and Santa Ana. Perhaps Tatiana could confirm these facts that only I know from literature. But anyway, if we refer to metropolitan areas, the study could compare these two previous concentrations with the 3 large metropolitan area of coffee, Pereira, as Tatiana said, Manizales, and Armenia. But above all, addressing the topic of spatial justice, it should be known that these areas are not particularly affected by violence, that there is a migratory flow that should map Quindío's relations with Spain or even Canada, where its inhabitants ended up. It could also map the pull effect for other immigrants in these metropolitan areas, and the dispossession, this will be a great map of dispossession for spatial justice due to money laundering, the purchase of assets or the generation of infrastructure linked to drug trafficking, not only hotels, but also large road infrastructures and the accumulation of land ownership. It's very important to know what the inhabitants of the UNESCO coffee areas in Colombia had at that moment to say. They were not asked, there was no consensus. The landscape was imposed on them, as shown by the removal of the banana plantation, for instance, that protected the coffee plantations, leaving unproductive coffee plantations in view, just to comply with the requirements declared by the landscape interest. In this sense, and beyond this example, I find it difficult to characterize the identity, in my opinion, and even more so with a genetic metaphor, as Lucia indicated in her contribution to her study today. It is important, therefore, the dynamics in the cartographies, as I know perfectly well that the researcher Valentina Galiulo tries to place in her studies, knowing her doctoral thesis and the fabulous work she does in different educational and research projects. And if we add heritage as narrative, as Tatiana proposes, the articulation, not only the right way, I think it's better to understand the problem broadly, adding the heritage, the articulation with Nicole research will provide an excellent approximation to the present variables, visible and non-visible, of reality and the other reality, which is fiction, but united. Here I recall the work of Professor Mauricio Cinquegrani from University of Kent, entitled, for instance, for many others, about a cinematic archaeology, which might be a methodological support. Care is not only health, as everyone knows. The main frame of this event is a valuable topic to go further. Responsibility for care is like space, socially constructed, and both can be socially changed. That's all. Apologies for my accelerated speech. I tried to say many things in line with the inspiring nature of these four researchers presented. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carlos. So we go ahead with the second panel, dialogue on democracy for heritage. I leave the floor to Kim, and the discussant will be Professor Graham Shin from the Columbia University. Thank you, Graham.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in such a wonderful event for ESRs to share mutual interest in heritage and metropolis. I'm Hyun-jae Kim, a PhD student of archaeology at the University of Cambridge, and my research is about memory, heritage, and identity. So for dialogue 2, democracy for heritage, 3 speakers will discuss their idea based on their own research, and our special mentor, Professor David Graham Shane from Columbia University, will give us valuable comments after the discussion. Let me start the first of this discussion. So my case study is about multi-layered memories and public engagement regarding colonial and world heritage. In terms of today's discussion, I would like to deal with the memory context in terms of heritage management in Metropolis, with the question of how we can develop the democratic way to preserve local context in urban heritage sites. First, as our everyday lives belongs to numerous groups of people, including families, neighborhood, professional groups, political associations, and etc. Varieties of everyday communication can be based on our memories of life. This can be called communicative memories, which constitute the field of oral history. What are the strengths and weaknesses when we deal with the oral histories? Through the practice of oral history, we can scrutinize the everyday form of collective memory with more precise information of people involved. My case study site makes their cultural content based on not only officially written history, but also peculiar qualities of local residents' experiences during the colonial period and the Korean War. The authentic context of local communities can be considered to be part of history. And in terms of this point, heritage embedding communicative memory is worth exploring to identify a democratic practice of heritage management. Second, based on communicative memories of citizens or people in Metropolis, we can consider a democratic ways to approach heritage in detail in order to achieve a form of consensus building community. To build consensus, the democratic ways are surely required, and the research explores this democracy in terms of the two important parts of the accessibility. The first one is about enhancing the access to all archives for public. This will be the first step for public engagement to allow general public to manage heritage in the local area. The digitization of archives could be one way to help public access to not only professional, but also general information about heritage sites in their metropolis. As well as this, the memory archives can be created by local community to include their own experiences and stories, which helps to assess the value of heritage sites. The second one is to develop an accessible way for citizens in Metropolis to get involved in heritage evaluation. The most popular example of this strategy is the Future Heritage Soul program, which allows local residents to voluntarily submit their recommendations of what they would like to list heritage with a collaborative process regarding the opinion of citizens. This form of policies or programs can create a meaningful way to build consensus for heritage management. So finally, based on such context and approaches, we can think about the different way to evaluate and to interpret heritage sites. Instead of a conventional way to deal with the heritage value, top-down approach in particular, the understanding of heritage based on democratic ways can contribute to build a new approach of heritage management. There will be also challenges to cope with the different opinions to look at heritage, however. The bottom-up approach will give us to broaden the insights of how to interpret heritage, reflecting local context and memories and their own experiences. Thank you very much. And let me go to second dialogue from Advamata, our friend. Her research is about urban-rural linkages. So Adva, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for the opportunity to speak today. I wanted to share with you some insights and aspects of my ongoing research, which is part of a collaboration from the TU Delft University and the Bezalel Academy in Israel. And as you can see, this research deals with the urban-rural linkages and their manifestation as attributes of heritage in the metropolis and their way to make a sustainable metropolis. So as my colleagues mentioned before me, we're dealing with a similar subject. Urban-rural areas enjoy different and often complementary assets, and better integration between these areas is important for socioeconomic performance and for creating a caring metropolis. More and more metropolises are actually defined by urban-rural linkages, and those linkages bear the potential of including demographic, labor, public services, and environment aspects that can actually become and participate in the heritage of the metropolis. Partnerships between urban and rural territories can enhance and better manage territorial relationships, and therefore they're an effective way to respond to the need to manage those interactions and to foster sustainable development and well-being in the metropolis. Those territories and the flows that connect urban and rural territories often cross traditional administrative boundaries. And therefore, the metropolis is a very important spatial configuration that can actually help attain sustainable development objectives to be achieved by all metropolitan units which share these flows across the region. The challenges, though, are very huge. The cooperation between different parts of the metropolis and different urban and rural territories can be difficult because due to difference in size, in resources, and capacity in between urban and rural and in between themselves. Other barriers can include regulatory and political obstacles, lack of trust and caring, and policy fragmentation. My research proposes a methodology to identifying a new metropolitan agenda in which the metropolis plays a crucial role in integration of urban and rural linkages, by working towards a common regional and even national metropolitan heritage agenda. What would be a fitting methodology for identifying those linkages and utilizing them as a generator for sustainable development of caring metropolises is the aim of the research. The research very broadly is focusing on observing, studying, and analyzing urban-rural linkages, shifts, and trends, as well as analyzing through big data those trends in order to come up with a sustainable methodology for metropolises to identify their own linkages and utilizing them towards a sustainable development framework. Thank you very much. And I'm giving the floor to my colleague.
First of all, I would like to thank you all for the opportunity to be talking to you guys and present my research. First, let me present myself. My name is Danielle Jomeida. I am a PhD student in architecture in the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. And my research is focused in the historical paths and how they relate with the local identities along the way. And I am focusing on studying the Golden Route and also the Darwin Paths, both located in the southeastern part of Brazil. And currently, I'm investigating this city, which is Magé, located in the outskirts of Rio de Janeiro metropolitan area. The main question that I'm bringing into discussion today is how can we think about heritage in a more democratic, also representative way? And it's not an easy question to answer, and that's what I'm trying to do with 3 methodologies that we are implementing here in the city of Magé. And the first step is to understand that we have a common shared history, and some groups are underrepresented due to prejudice, lack of economic power, racism, and also lack of representation in politics. So the first action that we are doing now is to articulate a participatory inventory where local leaders, as well as a diverse group of specialists, work together in order to investigate what is considered heritage throughout the territory. Articulated with that, we've been working with social cartography, articulating local schools with the surrounding areas and how they relate with each other. And we have to understand, since you can see in the diagram that I'm showing here, that the school is an important part within the community, since it's like the core of the activities and the future of the community, basically. So we are thinking about educational territory. And the last one is working with heritage education, understanding that the territory is a powerful way of unveiling local memories, celebrations, traditions, and also valuable places within the local communities. All these strategies are important to not only enhance the community and bring them into discussion, but also to create ways to communicate with them and also bring them into creating new policies to the city. We have to understand that Magé is a small fraction of the 22 municipalities that compose Rio metropolitan area, but is an important study case since it's one of the poorest within the metropolitan area. And that's why I'm investigating it. And it's part of the golden route that goes into the countryside of Brazil. That's it. Thank you very much.
Right now, thank you, David and Graham, Shane, to comment this panel. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thank you, Antonella, for inviting me. And it's an honor to be with so many friends on the panel. And also to see the research from so many different schools and really wonderful variety. Like Carlos, I hadn't seen the, I didn't know what I was going to see. And I thought my main line of critique is going to be about the metacity and the change that the informational society that we live in now necessitates in terms of memory and historical memory, living memory that we experience every day through our handheld and through big data, which people are referring to in this section. And also in terms of how this memory and different data recovery systems that are now plugged into our intellect create a new kind of intellect and a new kind of memory for the city, for the metropolis, and for the definition of the metropolitan territory that is very, very diverse. And it was fascinating to hear the earlier presentations and then this section. Just picking up on Kim in Cambridge, he made me think a lot about the Cambridge tradition and Norberg Schultz and the phenomenological approach that always set up a distinction between private personal memory that was always pretty messy, and then the scientific memory that was very clear, hyper objects, if you like. And then there was this communal memory, which was dialogic and in between science and personal. And in a way, his presentation captured some of that tradition and brought it into the 21st century in a quite beautiful way. I'm very positive about everything. So you have to remember there's a critical edge underneath. But in the time available, I was very, very interested in the Korean case study. Unfortunately, we didn't get any more material about it, but I would be very interested to know. And it is soul as a hyper object and super advanced, I don't know, digital ecology is a fantastic case study area that could be, would be very, very interesting. But to have the longue durée come in of the Cambridge history is a very nice, ironic twist. So I look forward, I hope you'll have a good time. Sorry about this slightly casual presentation. And then with ADVA, TU Delft also has an incredible tradition of digital rural urban studies. And TU Delft also, in terms of this, if you like, Norberg Schultz phenomenological approach, would place a much greater emphasis on the management of the communal metropole through municipal devices. And it's not really clear yet to me how in the fragmented authority that's hinted at in this research, exactly how it's brought together at a larger level. And it's a huge meta-object hybrid hyper-object problem of how you coordinate the micro and the macro. It's not just this study, it's a methodological methodological problem that I don't have the solution to personally, but I'm fascinated by, and how information working at multi-scales and multi-disciplines, how it is brought into some form of coordination, and this coordination drifts through different disciplines and different dimensions, different timescales. And you know, just to nip back to Nicola before with the dialogue between longue durée and syntagmatic, diachronic and syntagmatic, that kind of informational contradiction, if you like, is still present in the meta object, and it's not resolved in this new territorial approach. It's a very difficult problem inside the informational matrix, something I'm thinking about. I know I don't expect you to have the answer either, but it's a shared study that is very, very important. And the detail of it, I didn't get yet. And then to come to Daniel to try and wrap up, it's beautifully detailed case study and very exciting to see the question of agency and bottom up made very live in this approach to this town of Madge, which I've, you know, again, if we had more time, it would be amazing to understand more about the approaches of the different actors. There was a talk about a poetic and symbolic dimension that, you know, isn't really developed here in time because of the compression of our discussion. But it's also this sort of local indexes and historical dimension of a peri-urban area. It requires a whole other kind of matrix of measurement or study that I think is beginning to be very, very interesting here, how you map that other dialogic system and discussion. I look forward to hearing more about it. Again, it's funnily coming back to where we were in Cambridge with Norberg-Schulz, with these hyperobjects that have these three dimensions of the individual story, the communal story, and then the scientific coordination, how atomization, how do you bring those together? And I thank you for letting me have this opportunity to talk and to join this really interesting dialogue around the problem of monuments and memory and modern information, the meta city. Thanks again. I'm going to mute.
Thank you, Graham, as usual. So we can start at the last panel, that is governance is caring. And the discussion will be Professor Camillo Boano from UCL and Politecnico di Torino. I give the floor to Yana Chanduri. Thank you.
Thank you, Antelena. Is my slide visible? Yeah. Okay, so that was a very wonderful two dialogues on spatial justice and followed by democracy of heritage, and very thought-provoking, great presentations by my colleagues in that one slide, and very thought-provoking comments by the experts, Carlos and David and Eric set the stage. So it was, I'm glad we are here, and hi everybody once again, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening everyone, depending on our respective time zones. And it is once again an honor and an absolute pleasure to be part of the ESR Forum and Metropolis network for the dialogue Metropolitan Heritage Caring Metropolises for World Metropolitan Day. And today, our dialogue 3 with focus governance as caring within the broader theme of the international and multidisciplinary contextualization of information related to metropolitan heritages, spaces for caring of metropolises, and also debate between metropolitan heritage and legacy, according to new policies and practices of territorial management of the natural, cultural, economic, social capital of metropolises. And today we'll be looking at 3 cases, Delhi, Moscow, and London. I'm Jonna, and I'm from the Center for Sustainable Habitat. And I have with me Sinia Mezzanena. She'll be talking about Moscow, and Clemency Gibbs. She'll be talking about London. And together we would be touching upon the broad topic, caring of metropolises, and within the broader framework of UN Sustainable Development Goal 11. For Moscow, the focus is development versus conservation, and how does heritage protection work at the urban planning level in Moscow. For London, why are facadism practices increasing in East London? And for Delhi, the question that we are asking is, why is Delhi government not localizing the UN Sustainable Development Goals? So to broadly discuss Delhi, Delhi is currently the most debated city in the Asia Pacific and the world in terms of urban growth. As the world continues to urbanize, sustainable development depends increasingly on the successful management of this urban growth. Asia Pacific accounts for the 56% of the world's metropolitan population living in 103 metropolises, and within this, Delhi is estimated to cross 30 million by 2041. There are 2 important shifts probable in the demographic profile of Delhi, which includes a significant increase in the proportion of persons in working age group and an estimated 41% population increase due to in-migration. The growing needs of existing as well as projected population will add to growth of unplanned settlements, further unplanned settlements in Delhi, consequently increasing the urban pressure on the already vulnerable urban villages and urban heritage within the metropolis of Delhi. Further leading Delhi far from being a safe, resilient, inclusive, and sustainable city as envisaged by the UN Sustainable Development Goal 11. Within that, the target 11.4 of the UN SDG, as we all know, acknowledges the effective contribution of heritage management in the making of sustainable habitats. And in the context of Delhi and agglomeration of several historic cities, the development of Delhi as a sustainable habitat depends increasingly on the strategic management of its historic urban landscape and beyond. The planning policies as well as heritage management policies that govern this HUL of Delhi and beyond come out of the jurisdiction of multiple governing agencies. The UN Habitat's New Urban Agenda states a critical point in understanding that cities can be the source of solutions rather than cause of the challenges, and if well planned and well managed, urbanization can be a powerful tool for sustainable development for both developing and developed countries. Lastly, the UNESCO Cultural 2030 indicators measure and monitor the progress of cultures enabling contribution to the national and local implementation of the goals and targets of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and both as a sector of activity and a transversally across other sectors as well. So the master plan for Delhi is one of the key instruments that facilitates Delhi's development by assessing the present condition and guiding how to achieve the desired development. And the first master plan for Delhi came out in 1962 under the Delhi Development Act 1957, followed by master plan 2001 and then 2021, each of which is an extensive modification of the respective previous plan documents. And these plans were prepared for a 20 years perspective periods and provided a holistic framework for planned development of Delhi. The present draft master plan for Delhi is a response to the UN SDG in quite a few ways. However, while the master plan is a policy document, we need to have regulations for its actual implementation so that the metropolis can be caring. So with this, thank you very much. And I give the floor to my colleague, Sinia.
Thank you very much, Yana. And hello, everybody. I'm honored to be a part of this discussion today. And let me introduce myself. My name is Ksenia Mizenina. I am an urban planner and I work at Strelka. And today I would like to explore the question of how to provide the balanced transformation, keeping urban authentic features and on the other hand, letting the metropolis develop and transform. And yeah, I will use the case study of Moscow. Moscow is a city with a rich historic urban landscape founded 874 years ago. And now there are more than 8,000 cultural heritage sites with 3 UNESCO World Heritage Sites under protection. But at the same time, it is a rapidly developing 30 million population metropolis with an enormous number of projects, improving urban environment, housing, and infrastructure. And let me give you some numbers. 90 metro stations have been built since 2011. More than 10 million square meters of real estate have been built this year. And there is a large-scale renovation program taking place right now that involves 5,000 houses for demolition and includes almost 10% of the city area. And due to various factors, this development process is not always controlled. Territories are being transformed very quickly, and often not enough attention is paid to the evaluation and preservation of their existing features and values. Often we notice new developments that deteriorate the quality of space. And there are 2 main issues that we can link to this narrative. Issue number 1, at the moment, we do not have effective mechanisms for historic urban landscape protection. Existing land use mechanisms were developed in 2010s. They set a united protected zone that covers the entire center of Moscow and provided particular territories with special regulations. But today we witness how the most important historic views and panoramas are disappearing. The Kremlin buffer zone is being built up. That you can see this in the picture. And this is just one example. Issue number 2, Moscow lacks a coherent strategy for preserving its cultural heritage. There is no document that would provide a strategy of metropolitan heritage conservation and use, comprehensively protect valuable attributes of the history and the identity, that seeks to consolidate resources and provide an action plan involving different stakeholders, like local communities, into heritage conservation. And adding to that, we see that there is no strategic vision on how the metropolis should develop in general in the long term. So to find out how to balance development and conservation, we need to create a framework for the evaluation of what we have and develop the criteria of what is valuable in the city. We need to create a vision of heritage-based development, set long-term goals, and adapt suitable mechanisms, like a framework of historic urban landscape. And thank you very much. And I'm giving the floor to Clemency.
Hi, Jana, could you change to my slide?
I'm trying. There's some problem at my end. I'm going to stop sharing and start again, okay? Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay. Hi, I'm Clemency, and I'm a 3rd year PhD student at the Bartlett School of Architecture at UCL. And my question here asks why facadism practices are increasing in East London, although I could just have easily asked a question in relation to London more broadly, as the rise of facadism is seen across the city. But this area is a case study within my research and within the wider London metropolis. And just worth bearing in mind that I'm taking facadism here to denote the practice of facade retention as relates to historic structures. So my research looks primarily at the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, which is located on the fringe of the ever-expanding City of London, which is London's financial centre. Parts of the borough lie within what is known as the Central Activities Zone, which is a strategic zone described by the Greater London Authority, which is London's regional government body, as London's vibrant centre and one of the world's most attractive and competitive business locations. It contains the seat of national government and is renowned worldwide for its shopping, culture, and heritage. The powers allocated to the Mayor of London, who is the figurehead of the regional government, in 2008 now allow the Mayor to intervene and overrule local planning authority decisions if the site is of a certain size and lies within this central activities zone. This power has been exercised several times in the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, particularly by Boris Johnson when he was the Mayor of London. And facadism is prevalent in these cases, where financial motives override the local democratic processes of decision making. And so the external appearance of the area is maintained at street level, but the character and economy of the area is altered by displacing small local businesses and inserting large open plan office space to serve the overflow of the City of London. And this obviously suggests and demonstrates a very limited understanding of what the heritage of the city comprises, let alone the metropolis, limiting its interpretative value and potential to physical surfaces. And given that one of the stated features of this central activities zone that the Greater London Authority values is its heritage, the limited way in which the term is defined by the Metropolitan government needs to be interrogated and, I suggest, approached in a more holistic and collaborative manner. And so I'm looking forward to working with the Greater London Authority and Historic England as part of this Heritopolis project to discuss this amongst other questions of heritage in the metropolis. Thank you.
Thank you. The last comment by Professor Camillo Boano. Camillo, the floor is for you. Thank you, and thank you to join us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the stimulating different presentations. I've been less ordered than Carlos and David, not only because I had the privilege to go through all the presentations, but also because it's very complicated if you want to give meaningful comments to beautiful and so well packaged presentation. So thank you very much for allowing me. So I have two questions maybe that bounce back to my reflection across the different trajectories of territory of Delhi, of Moscow, and on London, is that if I'm not mistaken, none of you have used the word care. And I wonder whether care is something that is just a fictional, trendy logic that somehow substitutes an old-fashioned sustainability logic, or is really something that a metropolitan dimension could take into consideration. Of course, there's no issues about the provocativeness of the question, which is absolutely fine. What I want to point that I found extremely interesting is that if care matter, and if care emerge out of one of the key dimensions of the metropolitan thinking, which is the conflict, and the conflict between production and reproduction, how those dimensions are taken into consideration in the way in which Metropolis as a territory of investigation and as a productive territories of identities in conflict are important for all of you. The second comments or questions is, I was speaking about values, And therefore, the extractions of value and the extractive systems of giving values, either through plan, the master plan that Jana was mentioned about Delhi, or the logic of the policies that both Xenia and Clemency were mentioning. I was speaking about the way in which an analysis and a reflection is constructing different values to extract and be either imposed or superimposed to a landscape that is emerging and changing. And therefore, if this is the case, how the negotiations is happen about the formations of those values. In a way, who is defining the value for whom remain, to me, a critical reflection. A third level maybe of comments or question that stills to me is there is not a linguistic shift between metropolis and metropole, which for me, for some of like me that have been always working in post-colonial territory, are imposing a sort of very important dimension of looking back at distances, proximities, and the way in which those lines are reconstructing and reconfiguring inclusion and exclusion, being in, being out, up and down. So a sort of hierarchy of a spatial confinements, either biopolitical or not, into the discussion. So the question goes back again to the landscape, which is and how the landscape that we are mapping and provoking are making a sense within a massive carceral industrial productions of differences that at the global level is happening across the different cases, either London or Delhi in this very case, certainly true to a very peculiar socialist development of Moscow. And the last comments that I do have, which for me remain an important discussion, is how is possible, and let me mediate some of the reflection that are emerging elsewhere, how is possible to construct citations, endnotes, footnotes, and reference and text if we are still using the same categories of analysis that are land, infrastructures. So what are the category of analytical elements that are definitely useful for us to change the reflection from a sort of conventional urban planning to the metropolisations of those? So, and I think goes back to both the histories, but also the way in which we could question a novel intellectual framework through which. So I'm really curious about the way in which your research is developing. But I do absolutely believe that the comparison among the cases is probably the very rich experience that I have experienced today. So thank you very much for that opportunity.
Thank you, Camillo. Only one note, we will have a dialogue among Professor Mike Turner and Camillo Bueno in the next days. So I really think that it will be very inspiring and full of intellectual debate, but also very practical debate. So thank you again. I leave the floor to the two, let's say, angular pillar of this project, Professor Mike Turner from Bezalel Academy in Tel Aviv, and Professor Jae-Heon Choi from the Konkuku University, sorry for my pronunciation, in Korea, for the last remark and some conclusion. Thank you to all of you, most of all, in particular for the PhD researcher and that are so engaged in this project. Thank you to all our guests that gave us a lot of spark of further thought, and in particular to Remy Sekpikin, Rafael and Mike Turner and the Professor Choi, really the pillar of this new field of research so relevant for us. Thank you very much, Mike. The floor is for you.
Thank you, Antonella, and thank you all. This is really for us a launch event of the ESR Forum, and it has been such an enriching experience, especially being challenged by Carlos, David, and Camilo, and within a comparative understanding of where we are. I've always been, past weeks have been discussing the seminal essay of Franz Boas of 1896, which he writes about the limitations of the comparative method. So I think that we might have to sort of be very careful in about trying to make comparisons. In the words of Shakespeare, comparisons are odious. I would like also, first of all, to bring together the ESRs, and this for us has been thanks to the Milano group and the baton of Antonella, our first move out of our comfort zone. And we would like also, it's really for you, and therefore we are looking forward on this basis to know exactly the future where we're going. But we're at the beginning of this. This is, as I have told you, that we're really designing the car as we're driving it. And so we're really trying to unpackage the city. We unpackage the metropolis and to repackage it again with different identities, with different values, with the diversities which bring us together, and to trying to understand carefully exactly how this agglomerations will then perhaps evolve. So with this, I would just like to thank you and to be really supportive of our continuing activities within our initiative, and hand over to Jay, who is in fact going to be managing the next stage of the Heritopolis. Jay, over to you.
Oh, thanks, Mike. I think that Mike already delivering very important message to all of us. And I just want to say thank you all of you for being with us tonight, and maybe you are the daytime. I think that we can see each other through the webinar format, the 1st of this December. And feel like that everybody thinks that the Metropolis would be different from the heritage. So why we combine the Metropolis with heritage? But I think that I had my own answer, because that heritage is a living space for all of the different people. And then the number of metropolis has been growing so fast. So as Remy told us that today the number of the metropolis over 300,000 population is more than 1934. So the number is getting low, and the problem is that we concerning the time scale, how we manage the metropolis and how we left over metropolises, not concerning the heritage. Probably heritage is not only from the past, but it is contemporary heritage also based on the selection, value selection, and we can also design the future heritage for our next generations. So maybe we need to understanding the value of the heritage combined with the metropolis. And I think that this is time for that. And this is time for share all of your wisdom together throughout our next generation. We call that next stage researchers. Mike and I'm all the time getting, and you are the new future. So this is exactly moment we now to start for the future. So that's it all. And I really appreciate joining us tonight, all of us. Thank you very much. See you again in Seoul. Bye.
1st and 2nd of December.
Yep, 1st and 2nd of December.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all of you, and I hope to see you in December all together. Ciao. Grazie. Grazie mille.